The Cat's Whiskers podcast is proudly sponsored by the Bunkers Hill Hockley. Don't miss Panthers game day offers, including Coors Light at £2.50 a pint.
It's Wednesday, it's 8:46, and this is the Ask TCW podcast live. Yes, good evening and thank you for joining us on this week's Ask TCW podcast. If you're listening in live, thank you very much and do get in contact with us. You do know what to do by now. Just get in contact with us via Twitter. Our handle is obviously at Cat's Whiskers TV. We would love to hear from you on tonight's show. But let me introduce who is on tonight's show and who will be answering your questions that you have sent in. We do have Andy Haywood with us.
Good evening.
Good evening. We also have Jono Bullard.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. And our special guest this week to kind of top off a month, would it be, of media guests on our Ask TCW podcast, should I say, is former Radio Nottingham Panthers reporter, but now lead presenter of Rams TV, Mr. Owen Bradley. Good evening, Owen.
Evening, guys. I really hoped you were going to say saving the best till last, but apparently not.
Well, I'll save that till the end, and then we'll thank you by saying you were the best guest that we've had.
Well, I only say it because I've been teased relentlessly by Matt Davis and Chris Ellis that they got on before me, so I had to get that in first.
Well, I'm sure they'll send in a question if they are listening in live, asking who would win in a sack race or something out of you three. But hey,
they're very welcome to.
But first of all, how are you doing, Owen? Because it's been a while since we spoke to you. Obviously, a bit of a changing job for you. So how's that going? And do you miss reporting on the Panthers like you used to?
Yeah, it's nice to be talking hockey again. I have to say that I'm not getting to as many games as I used to. I'm obviously staying bang up to date with what's going on with the team, and everything seems to be going pretty well, which is good. Obviously, I'm a huge hockey fan, so I'm always knees deep in NHL and Elite League stuff. So I'm missing it, but sometimes you have to take new opportunities and do new things, and the new gig is going very well indeed. So while I am missing it, I don't regret the decision at all.
Good. Right. Well, shall we get cracking, guys? Because we've got some fantastic questions from the listeners. And let's start with the first one from John Roper. This one is via Twitter. And John asks, as a Steelers fan, it looks like the Panthers are the team to beat this year. Does the panel concur? Now, if you'd listened to Monday's review podcast, obviously a very positive podcast coming back off the back of a 4-point weekend for the Panthers. But Owen, we'll come to you first. So, are the Panthers the team to beat this year from your eyes?
You guys will have seen much more of the Panthers and the rest of the league than I will have. But my feeling has been since the very early days at the start of the season that Nottingham would be right up there. The squad seems really well balanced. They score by committee. They aren't reliant on one or two guys, and that's even true in net, where you've got two guys now competing for the number one spot and a very capable British backup as well. So I think Nottingham have got an awful lot of depth, which is what Corey's been building to over a couple of years. The personalities seem right this year. I don't know the guys as well as I've known groups in the past, but they seem like a very good group. It might be an interesting one from a Steelers supporting friend trying to put a bit of pressure on Nottingham. But I certainly would think at this sort of stage, everyone's going to be looking at Nottingham and expecting them to lead the way. And I think they've got a very, very good shot of winning the title. I think if any team finishes above them, they'll be champions.
Yeah, good point. I actually listened to Corey's interview on the Panthers website today, and Gary Moran actually mentions that we're just under halfway. And it's a good place to be, isn't it, really? Obviously, a lot of games left, a lot of points to be played for and lost. But Andy, do you think we are now seeing that Panthers are going to be the team to beat?
At this stage, yes. I mean, we're top of the league with games in hand, so you would have to say that currently we are the team to beat. One of the questions that we've got coming up later on, we'll probably go into a bit more detail about it, but obviously I think Belfast are also looking pretty strong at this stage, considering the rest of their schedule for the season. So I certainly think, as it stands at the moment, we are certainly in the best position. But it is very close. There's a lot of games between sort of these top 4, top 5 teams that are competing for this league title. There's a lot of games, but in between each other. And ultimately you're looking at big swings in sort of table standings. If we beat Cardiff, then it's 2 points gained to us and 2 points that they can't get. On the flip side, if Cardiff beat us at home, then it's 2 points closer they are to us, and catching us up. So it's these type of games now that are becoming pivotal, and I think that we are in the best position, but it's something that we need to stay on top of and sort of manage these games effectively, because it's coming up to crunch time now. So at most seasons we have this bit of a lull over Christmas. Ironically, last year it wasn't so great as a season, but we beat Sheffield home and away, and everyone seems to be pretty rosy around Christmas time. But it can soon change. And obviously, on the flip side, we've had seasons where we've started like we are now, and then all of a sudden Christmas comes and we're out of it already. So it's a big ask, and there's still a lot of hockey to be played by everyone, but currently at this stage, I think I'd concur with the Sheffield fan.
John, I'm going to come to you on the question in a minute, but I just want to go back to Owen in regards to something that Andy's just brought up, and the Christmas period. And just from your point of view, Owen, the fact that you obviously covered the Panthers for many, many years, what's your kind of view on that Christmas period? And as Andy says, we have had nightmare times over the Christmas period, but is that just something that's down to a bit of luck with the Panthers, or is it something else?
It's something that gets talked about, doesn't it, every year, that the Panthers have this traditional dip around Christmas, and I know that they've not had great kind of turns of the year in previous seasons. Without looking at the numbers, I wouldn't really be able to go into it and dig down to it into too much detail. I think certain teams, certain clubs maybe always have little spells in the season where they suffer for whatever reason. I mean, just bringing it back to Derby over the last 4 or 5 years, they've always sort of started slowly in the Championship, really picked up and gone on a tear from kind of October through to Christmas, sort of like they've done this year. And the fear for Derby fans right now is, are they going to fall away in the second half of the season like they have previously? So I'm not sure it's just a phenomenon that's central to the Panthers. And actually, often what you'll find is with any team, the stats will always even out a little bit. So if Nottingham go into the Christmas period on a really good run, well, then the Christmas period is probably not going to be as sustainable, as highly returning as it has been previously. So, it's never something that, being around the group and talking to the coaching staff, that they've ever kind of said, I think we have an issue with this time of year because of this and this and this. I think also because there's, people aren't at work, and because there's a lot more games, people maybe pay a bit more attention to it. So I can't really add any insight to it, really. It's obviously just fingers crossed that we don't see it again this year.
Yeah, very true. Now, JB, I'll bring you in on John's question. First of all, one point to you, JB. Obviously, we know you're a big fan of the Steelers. How does it feel for a Steelers fan to actually say the words, Panthers are the team to beat this year?
It must be difficult for them. But then again, they aren't doing too great, are they? I've seen a lot of comments from fans of the Steelers, including my dear wife, who basically saying that they're just not very good. There's an imbalance. They haven't got good enough players, and I think we saw that on Saturday a bit, where they huffed and they puffed, but they never looked to have anywhere near the quality of what Panthers had. Nowhere near. And we sort of proved it in the third period, where we put our foot on the gas, and Zach Phillips proved absolutely instrumental in that third period.
So
but
do you concur with what John's saying then, basically?
I think we are the team to beat at the moment, but as everybody else has said, there is still an awful lot of hockey to be played. We're not even halfway through the season, so it's probably one to ask around sort of end of February, March time and see where we are then.
So there you go, John. That's the answers from the three guys. And as John says, I suppose we'll see in a few months' time. But thank you very much for getting in touch with us and asking us that question. Now we will move on to a Panthers fan named David Spence. Good evening, Spence. Hope you're well. It's a bit of a long question, so bear with me, folks, if you're listening in. But David says, what do the panel think on the impact of a potential fight affecting the atmosphere of Panthers v Steelers games? For example, the other games this season, with the prospect of Fitzgerald and Gagnon having people at fever pitch before the game starts, and every time those two are on the ice together, the anticipation is always high. Saturday seemed flat from the start because no preconceived idea of a scrap. Last season, there was also dead atmospheres because Fitzgerald wouldn't fight McGrattan. However, the year before, when it was Cam versus Fitzgerald, people were buying tickets for the fights. So, in essence, David Spence is asking, do fights still sell hockey more than anything else? Jono, I'll come to you first on that one.
It's a great question. In fact, it's a brilliant question. It's one I've really had to think about a lot. Do fights still sell hockey more than anything? I think if you look at the makeup of the attendance for Panthers-Steelers games, especially the one on Saturday, I think you have to say yes. I think people are still attracted by the fighting. Of course, it doesn't happen as much anymore, but when I speak to people just generally about hockey, they say, oh, it's just full of fighting. Oh, is there a lot of fights? And you sort of say, well, no, not really, not anymore. They probably used to be, but not much now. However, having said that, the game against Braehead, there was 3 fights, but that was the exception rather than the rule. I think the anticipation of a fight does sell hockey more than anything. The atmosphere, he was right, was incredibly flat for long periods on Saturday because nothing was really happening on the ice. Okay, you had Levi Nelson being Levi Nelson, but every time somebody tried to get him to go, he'd just run off, which is his usual self. So that was never going to happen. Gagnon would probably have gone with Fitzgerald had he been playing, but Fitzgerald is suffering from a serious injury. He's going to be out for a few weeks, and even when Zach Fitzgerald comes back for that, is he going to want to fight considering he's had a facial injury? So that may be part of the answer as well. Yes, fights do sell hockey more than anything, but I think once people come and they're attracted and they stay, then I think they realise there's a lot more to it than fighting itself.
I mean, Owen, obviously you mentioned at the start of the show you're a big NHL fan, etc. We've seen fighting, decrease in the number one league, and that's why we've seen the likes of McGrattan and Cam over here, basically. But do you kind of agree with Jono in the sense that for certain games at certain times, people are looking for that fight and they're going for that just to potentially see that fight?
Yeah, I think we're talking about two different audiences. We're talking about your hockey fans like us, who for us fighting's not at the top of the agenda, but we all know casual fans or people that haven't been for a couple of years, or just people you talk to about the sport at work or whatever. And they'll say, is there still fighting? So the perception of hockey as a sport is that there is still that side of it, and that is still a big, important part of it. And when I think back to kind of big moments that I remember from the years of covering the club and as a supporter of the club, fighting is often front and centre of that, and you can't kind of hide away from it. So it is still massively part of the agenda. In terms of how it affected the crowd and how it can affect the crowd, I mean, I wasn't there on Saturday, so I can't comment specifically on the action. But I think sometimes, and I think the Nottingham crowd is kind of as guilty as this for anyone, is there's a lot of people that will sit on their hands and wait for something to happen. And I think for a lot of fans, rather than being proactive and really getting up and getting behind their team, they will wait for the team to do something. And often they will wait for a scrap or a big hit or something like that. And so I think that's where you feel it and you see it affect the crowd. And it can be kind of a kickstart to the atmosphere sometimes. Sometimes you won't hear Panthers fans chant for 2 periods and then there'll be a fight and then they'll come alive. And that's when they're the best fans of the league. But up until that point, a lot of the time, they can be pretty dreadful. And the rink can be pretty quiet, in my opinion. So I think there's definitely going to be a lot of people that will go to the big games like Sheffield Nottingham, that know it is the big rivalry, that will be expecting a fight. And there's no doubt that affects the atmosphere. And I think for the game in this country, you talked about comparing it to the NHL, the two, they're almost at very different stages at this point. And for the game in this country, whether we like it or not, or the governing body like it or not, fighting is still a part of the sport in this country.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, Andy, we're coming up to the weekend, another big game against, a potential title rival. That are always a little bit, there's a little bit of niggle there, etc. So, again, we might have some sort of casual fans, as Owen just mentioned, buying a ticket because they've heard about it, they've read about it, a friend's told them about it, that they can get a little bit feisty. So do you kind of just, do you agree with the concept that people are buying tickets to potentially see that fight?
Yeah, and I think they always will do. Because there is this sort of attitude amongst people that don't follow the sport that it is a violent sport, so it will always attract people like that. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing as such. Ultimately, as a minority sport, we need to get people through the door. Ultimately, so as much as certain leagues and certain teams and things like that are perhaps going the other way, we've got to look at our own best interests as a league. And I think there's no surprise that we see teams that sign players like we've mentioned, like Jansen, like McGrattan. Fitzgerald's been around the league now for a number of years. Rosehill, players like that. They're big signings because they get people coming, they get people talking. And to be fair, you've only got to look at someone like Fitzgerald as a perfect example where he is literally probably the most popular person in Sheffield. He's universally within the hockey community, obviously. He's universally loved by them, and it's because of his role. It's I'm sure he's a fantastic person, but I think there's that element of, because his role is to protect his teammates and his role is to fight at times. It's almost like people then find it odd that he's a nice person because he spends his time punching people. So because of that, it's almost overcompensated about how nice a person he is, and that's why these type of players are always fans' favourites, because they are genuinely lovely people, and they bring a part of the game that whether leagues and officials like it or not, people genuinely love.
I mean, just very quickly, I'll kind of open it up to all three of you. Is there anybody on the panel tonight that doesn't think fighting should be in the game anymore?
No, I think
or do we all?
No, of course it's a high contact, fast sport. Of course, there's going to be fighting. Yeah, if somebody doesn't like a check or somebody wants to protect a teammate, the gloves come off, and that happens in every league in the world. So, no, fighting. I don't think fighting will ever be eradicated from the sport.
There was an awful lot of people in the Staples Centre the other night watching Thorburn and Stewart. I think it was Thorburn. Sorry, it was definitely Chris Stewart, whose brother played for us in the lockout season. When they dropped the gloves and had a proper, square off, toe to toe. The place was loud. People like it, and with that in mind, and what Jono said, it will always be around. There will always be an element of self-policing, and there always should be.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that question, Spence. And we will move over to Twitter because some people have been getting in touch with us live throughout the podcast so far. So thank you very much for that. A couple of questions for you, Owen. So we'll go through those ones very quickly.
Oh boy.
So, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. We mentioned him at the start of the show, or you did. Chris Ellis.
Yeah.
Very, very well known to many people.
Good.
He's obviously. Yeah. He's obviously thrown in a very serious question, so I want you to take your time and think about it, and answer from the heart if you can, please.
Sure.
Chris would like to know who would win in an arm wrestle between Owen Bradley or Brock Wilson.
Well, I've heard he's been working out a little bit recently, so I think Brock would probably edge it just.
Okay, thank you for taking your time to answer that question, Owen and Chris. I hope you got the answer that you were looking for. Another quick question for you, Owen. This is from our very own Ant. He says, how does Owen Bradley feel about his team getting the prize draw in the third round of the FA Cup? # one chop no more. Obviously referring to Derby County.
Yeah, Derby away at United in the Cup. I'm slightly conflicted about it, to be honest, because I've never worked at Old Trafford. And I missed out on the chance of going with Radio Derby when Burton were there in the whatever the League Cup's called now, earlier in the season, because I was just kind of in my notice period, so they sent somebody else. And obviously, I probably won't go to Old Trafford in January either. I am pitching and hoping that we might be able to do an outside broadcast from there. So if we can do that, I'll be really happy. If not, I'm sort of not bothered because I always present from the stadium, so I'm pleased, obviously, but not over the moon.
Well, that was a question from Ant, who does support Manchester United, who is from Nottingham, and I believe started supporting Man United in 1999 for some weird reason. So there we go. Thank you very much for that question, Ant. We'll move on to a far more serious question, and this one comes from Chris Lovell. Good evening, Chris. Thank you very much for getting in touch and listening to the show. And Chris says, given the standard of officiating in the EIHL and the fact Galactus had about 1 million penalties for the Giants against Guildford, how big do you think players' reputation is when calling penalties? And then he just says, in brackets, not saying he didn't deserve it, he can be a tool. That is Chris' words, not mine, if you're listening, Galactus. Jono, we'll come to you. Do you think players' reputations are in the back of the minds of the new DOPS system? No.
And I'll point you to two examples, Brian McGrattan and Cam Jansen. Because everybody said when they signed, they'll be up against DOPS every single week, or they'll be getting lots of bans. I don't think they got any. Between them, I don't think they spent a single game suspended during their time with the Panthers or their time in the Elite League. So no, I don't think reputation does. I think Galactus is one of those players. He plays with an edge, and I think he plays on the other side of dirty at times. I mean, you only have to look at the outcry after the Fretter incident, and I think sometimes it comes down to officials, and officials sometimes do get a lot of stick that is most of the time undeserved. The officials know the rules better than anybody. Anybody sat in the stands, and probably anybody sat on the player benches as well. You've only got to look at the abuse that Michael Hicks got on Saturday night because of the penalty shot that he gave against the Panthers. When it came to it, when we saw that, he was absolutely spot on with that decision. Mm-hmm. As galling as it was for the Steelers to get that penalty shot, and okay, they missed, but he got that call absolutely right. And I think if you take the time to look over some game tapes, and I've said it before, every time I've gone to a game as a neutral, you look at the referee's decisions and you go, yep, correct. And it's another one that I've said I recommend everybody to do is download the rule book. You can download it into your smartphone, and it just helps you. It just helps everybody's education. It certainly helped mine as a hockey fan, where I can just have the chance to look up the odd call that I don't understand. And the thing is, it was there in black and white in the rule book that shooting the stick in the defensive end is a penalty shot. So Mike Hicks got it absolutely spot on. And the thing is, if he's getting that spot on, then chances are he's getting most other calls spot on. Now, referees are human. I'm sure they'll be helped far more when it becomes a 4-man system. But generally, I think if you look at it in the cold light of day, the referees get the vast majority of their calls absolutely right.
I mean, it's funny, you mentioned the 4-man system, and obviously that's coming into us in the new year, so we don't have to wait long for that, really. But Owen, from your point of view, what have you kind of made of the new DOPS system that we've had since obviously the Freta Galakis kind of incident? Do you think it's been better for the sport, or, as you know, I've seen on forums and on Facebook groups kind of saying that it's sort of harming the sport in a way? It's taking it not too seriously, but the bans are obviously, they've increased, tenfold really from what we were used to. But so do you think it's been a positive step for the Elite League?
Yeah, I think it has, and I think the league had to do something after the farce of the Steelers Giants calls, which you just had to see it once, and you realise that they'd got that wrong, and you don't want to go over old ground, but they got it wrong. Simple as that. And I applaud the league for doing something and moving reasonably quickly to get something new in place. I've thought a few times that some of the bans that have been dished out have been on the lenient side. So personally, I'm not against those going up a little bit in terms of number. I mean, just to follow on from what Jono was saying, I think, again, and I sort of always have a bit of an affinity with referees because I used to referee inline hockey from when I was maybe 12 till I was about 18. And it's obviously nowhere near the level of the Elite League, but, at whatever level you referee, it's a tough job. And actually, I think in the Elite League, most of the time, the officials do a good job. Sometimes they blow calls, but I think for the most part, they do pretty well, especially considering the lack of support that they get and the number that there are. And, these guys aren't fully professionals like in other leagues around the world. What I will say is that sometimes I think it's inevitable that reputation will go before you, especially when things happen on the ice in a split second. And as much as officials, I think, try not to take that baggage in and will tell you that they don't, I think every now and again it will creep in. So while it's not a huge issue, I think it's certainly there. But in terms of the direction that it's moving in, I think it's only a positive thing with trying to improve officiating and improve DOPS and all that sort of thing. The only thing I'm not comfortable with generally as a rule is changing rules mid-season. And I think it's true for the Challenge Cup with picking your opponent that suddenly came out of nowhere and suddenly going to a 4-man system out of nowhere. I'm never a fan of when competitions sort of change on the fly, even if those rules are a step in the right direction. For me, it just kind of compromises the integrity a little bit.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. But thank you very much for your question, Chris. We will move on to another question now, and this one comes from Gareth. And Gareth asks, "Have we finally found it? 2, what is it? And 3, what are Steelers doing wrong?" So, Andy, I'll come to you first. Can you dissect those questions for us?
Have we found it? I presume if we win the league, yes. If we don't win the league, then no. Because ultimately it will be the same as most other seasons, and you could argue that we didn't have it then because somebody else does. What is it? That's the $1 million question, isn't it? If you knew the answer to that, you'd win it every season, and you'd win every game. I suppose it's about. I think getting recruitment right first time is a massive, massive help. I think that's key. We've seen before where teams will sign a team and then partway through the season they'll change a couple of players and it'll click. The year we won the league, we started off with Martin Tumer on defence. Let's not forget that. We ended it with Lapine and Kelsey Wilson joining, and it clicked. And there's other times where you bring in replacements and it just doesn't work, and we've seen an awful lot of that. But I think I think signing a team that clicks and gels and just they all want to learn and they all want to sort of pull in the same direction. I think getting that from the outset is a massive benefit. I think that plays a huge part in setting the tone early, and I don't think it's a surprise that we did so well in the CHL, and I don't think it's a surprise that we're where we are in the Elite League because of that kind of. Ultimately, there's an element of luck involved in it because you don't know how people are going to play with each other. You don't know how they're going to react to certain things, and you know, in our league, we don't have, you know, fantastically in-depth scouting sort of networks. It's all, you know, players have played with this such and such or have come on this recommendation and stuff. So there is an element of luck involved in what we get over here. But I also think as well, though, that there's just Owen touched on it earlier. There's a balance in this team. You know, you can tell just by looking at the team and looking at the results. We're scoring goals, but most games, all the goals are coming from different players. It was, I think, the Bussier's double on Sheffield was the first sort of double goal scorer for quite some time, I believe. You know, and when we beat Cardiff 7-4, I believe all seven players, you know, all seven goal scorers were different players, and it's that level of, yes, it's nice to have a guaranteed 40 goal scorer, but if he goes through a spell in a month where he's not scoring any goals, then you know you sort of up the proverbial creek. So having this depth. You know, and players chipping in and getting goals on a sort of regular basis, but not, you know, lighting the league up in goal scoring. I think that's a huge part. And with regard to Sheffield, I don't really know. It's odd because I still see them as being there or thereabouts. I said last week that I still think they'll win the league. You know, granted, a lot can change over this next month or so, and we'll see. Probably have a better judgment after the end of this calendar year. But I think at this moment in time, my opinion hasn't really changed. They've made a couple of changes recently. Obviously, they've brought in Romberg back again, and Brady Rams is now left, and they've brought in a Finnish defenseman. So, you know, they're looking to improve. And you know, let's not forget that they're playing short of bodies. They're playing with a suspension to an import, and they're still hanging in at the top. So, you know, I don't think they're as good as they have been. And I think Jono's right. You could tell on Saturday there was a different sort of level in quality, particularly in that third period between the two teams. It was close for 40 minutes, and then it was almost like we thought, you know what, let's put this game to bed and let's get the 2 points. And watching that game in particular, there was, like I say, there was a different level in sort of class, I suppose, in quality between the two teams, and that may very well be the same and stay throughout the whole season. But you know, it could also, these signings that they make, they get a few players back from injury, they go on a roll, and all of a sudden, you know, they're back in, you know, top of the table and challenging. So I don't think it's the best Steelers team we've seen for a while, but they're still performing on the ice at times. So it's a tough one to call at the moment because, as we mentioned last week, there's an awful lot of unrest, and some of it seems to be a bit unjust, but some of it obviously seemingly isn't.
I mean, Jono, you know, you've watched Panthers for many years, and we've done this podcast now for many years, and you know, the last few years have been hard sometimes, haven't they? There've been some weekends where I think we've even said before we've gone live on a few of them, or before we press the record button, you don't actually want to do it because you're that kind of depressed because it's been a poor weekend. You don't really see any light at the end of the tunnel. So, you know. But
on the other side, you have podcasts like we had on Monday where everybody's happy and everything is positive, because there is nothing to complain about at the minute.
And this is what I was going to say. So, tying that into Gareth's question, I mean, have we finally found it? For me, I don't really know what it is. But what
we have at the moment.
What have we found?
I think it's balance. It's balance and teamwork. Basically, we're not relying on individual players. We've got depth throughout the whole lineup. Depth in the net minding, depth in defence, depth in the forward lines. Everybody is contributing. There's no passengers in this team whatsoever. Everybody is contributing. And just a few figures I pulled out when I was looking at, and I think this has a lot to do with where we are at the moment as well. I was looking at some tables. Panthers are 10th out of the 12 teams for number of penalty minutes this season. 254 penalty minutes. Belfast are top with 550. So you look at that, that's 5 whole games that Belfast have been penalised more than we have. But we're not a soft team. The team stands up for each other, but they're incredibly disciplined. They only do it when they have to. And that is massively important. It's not leaving a short bench, therefore we don't get tired. The power play has improved immeasurably over the last few weeks. We're now 4th out of the 12 teams. We were bottom. The power play is at 23.94% now. 17 power play goals in 19 games. Steelers top with 26.8% on the power play. And we're also second in penalty killing, 83.56. I mentioned this on Monday. We killed all 7 of Steelers' power plays on Saturday night, which was immense because they are the best power play team. Steelers also top on the penalty kill, 88.17. We've allowed 12 power play goals in 19 games, but also scored 3 short-handed. So this is it. We're balanced. We've got depth. We've got a team where we're not relying on individuals, and I think that is huge. And they appear an incredibly tight unit, and we've not seen that since 2012-13. And as I said previously, there's still a long way to go, but I've got so much hope and so much faith in this team so far. And like I say, there's nothing to complain about, and that is just a wonderful position to be in. As far as what are the Steelers doing wrong, it's quite simply they've recruited wrong and they don't have any balance. And I know Andy says he can see them winning the league. I can't unless they make major changes, and I'm looking at least 25 to 30% of their squad.
Owen, bringing you in on this, is it? Would you just agree it is depth and the balance of the squad? Is it really that kind of simple? Is that what we've found this year?
Yeah, I think so. I think coaches, when they recruit, and you can spend the summer recruiting and you can get the players in, and after a week, 10 days, you know that the team's not going to be at the level you thought it would be, and you can chop and change, and you can make as many changes as you want, but it's sort of by that point it's too late. And I think this year, very early on, I think anyone with half a brain could see that this team had something about them. There's always that reactionary stuff from some supporters who'll say this player's not good enough, that player's not good enough. But when you're a team like this who is balanced and who, scores by committee, there will be players who have a quiet week or two, but that doesn't mean you should cut them. And I think, the people that are important in this process saw quite early on that, the team that they'd recruited were pretty decent. I think you can have it, whatever it is, you can have it and not necessarily win the title because, sometimes other teams have it too. So it's very, at the end of the season, it's very, easy to say, well, that wasn't good enough, this wasn't good enough. Sometimes you can be a lot closer than you think to winning the title. Sometimes you can just be beaten by the better team. But as I said earlier, I think Panthers this season have a great group and they have as good a chance as anyone as we kind of approach the halfway point of being there at the end of the season.
Yeah, and as the old cliche says, come the end of the season, the tables do not lie, do they? So whoever is on top will have it. And like you say, maybe another team will have, but it might just be a little bit closer than what some people, look at and kind of take it on face value as. But thank you very much for that question, Gareth. We will move on now to a question from Jerome Lucy. And Jerome says, were the Braehead clan highlights showing the nets continuously being removed by Patrick Galbraith a clear piece of propaganda by the club? Now, I'm going to come to you, Owen. I'm going to come straight back to you because, you can give us an insight into this kind of, highlights package and bring an angle from obviously the sport and the career that you have.
Yeah, it's just something to kind of throw into this debate in terms of what clubs can and can't do. So we have an issue with Rams TV, and it's not just us, to be fair. And I think a season or two ago, someone in the Championship got fined for it. There are rules what you can show in-game at matches. You can't show contentious decisions. And that's an obvious thing, really. If you show a replay of something contentious where the referee might have got it wrong, you might incite the crowd. So, there could be a penalty shout in the first half. We can't show a replay. We can't show it at half time. We can only show it, at full time when the game is over. And I think I may remember some issue of Sheffield doing something like that, showing replays of things in game, and I think I tweeted about it at the time and kind of offered that view on it as well. In terms of what Braehead did, I haven't seen the highlights, so I don't know. I think it's a legitimate thing to show if it's part of a play. If there's a goal scoring chance and that chance ends with the net coming off its moorings, then fine. But if you're consistently showing that over and over again, yeah, I'm not too sure about that. But I always wonder who's putting together highlights for teams, because I watch some stuff and I'm just like, this is too long, this is too boring, the voiceovers, or whatever it is. Sometimes I watch things and think, who is making these decisions? You're not thinking about the audience, and maybe that's what Braehead did here. Maybe they were trying to make a point. I haven't seen it, but clearly it's one of those areas where there aren't rules from the league. There aren't kind of standards and set practices and things like that, and it's left up to the teams to do it themselves. And when you have that sort of situation, you leave yourself open to this.
John posted the highlights in our WhatsApp group earlier today. Did you think it was, a little one step too far from the clan, and they were putting them in, as propaganda, and as Jerome sort of says.
Well, to bring in another question from Max Artis, he says, why doesn't the league enforce some sort of standards in goalposts? It's clear that the goalposts aren't good enough. And how many times does the nets come off the moorings in Nottingham?
Coventry.
Yeah, in Nottingham they don't. They've got to really clatter the nets to come off at the NIC. Because they use proper net pegs that mean that it's not going to come off. It's quite clear that the ones in Braehead are not up to standard, same as the ones in Coventry. And the thing is, the home netminder is going to know how to play that, so probably keeps away. They're used to it. Whereas an away netminder who only goes in the odd time each season isn't. So there was nothing I saw in them highlights that suggested that Patrick Galbraith was deliberately moving the nets off the moorings. It was just the fact he was bumping into them and they came off. One time on the highlights he shows him putting it straight back on again. So yeah, he wasn't looking to get an advantage. It's just basically poor design in the rink, and it needs sorting, frankly.
So Andy, you get charged with sorting out these net pegs in the moorings, etc. Bringing in Max's question. As Jono says, doesn't happen in Nottingham very often. Happens a lot in Coventry. From the highlights, it happened a lot on Sunday night in Braehead. What do they need to enforce a rule? Do they, is it up to the clubs, or about that the league took this a bit more seriously? Because I do go back to the Coventry. I've had that for many years regarding issues regarding net pegs and moorings in Sky Dome.
It's a tough one because I don't think there's a real need to necessarily enforce standardisation, but I just think people have got to be aware of the different varieties. It's no different to ultimately it's no different to the way that the pucks react to the kickboards or the stanchions. Some rinks have got stanchions, some rinks haven't. We've got a bit of both. So behind the goals, we've got stanchions on the plexiglass. Around the sides, we don't. So the puck reacts differently, randomly around the rink and around the country. And I think that it's one of the things I like regarding the nets. I appreciate that it can be a pain when they're coming off every 5 minutes, but it's part of the makeup. It's part of what the teams have to live with. It's what makes the game what it is there. So I don't necessarily think that there's a cause for standardisation, but it's something that I think drill a little bit further down. Get slightly longer pegs, and your issue is probably not going to be as bad as it is at the moment. But I think one of the things that I think every goalie will say is that they use the post to sort of push off when they're in the butterfly position.
Yeah,
and naturally, if you've got small pegs in a small depth hole, then the net is going to come off, and that seemingly is going to, is what the issue is in Braehead. There are ways of getting around it, and that's adapting your pegs and changing it. But ultimately, if they don't want to, then that's their choice. But they have to, ultimately they live by the sword, they die by the sword. So it's it's their own prerogative and their own choice, and ultimately I don't have an issue with that.
Okay, well, thank you very much for those questions, Jerome and Max. We will move on to a question that we've had via email. Now, if you do have a question for any of this or during any week, and you think, it's a bit long for Twitter or you're not on Facebook, we do actually have a email address, and that is tcwonline@gmail.com. So if you've got a question and it's more than 280 characters, then do send us an email, and we will still put it in the show, as we will do because of Steve Warren's email. Now, Steve sent us all the league games for our conference until the 31st of December. Obviously, that's thing about the Sheffield Steelers, the Belfast Giants, the Nottingham Panthers, and the Cardiff Devils. I won't go through them all because obviously there is a lot of fixtures, but Steve has basically asked us a few questions, and he wants Owen's predictions, he wants Andy's predictions, and he wants Jono's predictions. So, number one, we'll go through each one, and then I'll get all three of you to answer one question, and then we'll move on to the next one. So, number one, will Panthers be seeing the new year in at the top of the league? Owen Bradley, you can kick us off.
Well, I've not done the level of homework that some have done on this one. I'll give the optimistic answer and just say yes, I think they'll still be top at the start of the new year.
Okie dokie. Andy, I'll come to you next.
Yes, and I presume that Owen is referring to me when he says preparation.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I think we will just.
Okay, we'll come back to that when we've answered all the questions. Jono, finally, is it a full house?
Yes, we will be.
Okie dokie. So that is 3 yeses for that question. Number two, could Steelers' title challenge be over before the new year starts in view of their conference results so far? Their first 2 games in 2018 sees them travel to Belfast too. Obviously, the Steelers have, let's be honest, a terrible record when it comes to in-conference games so far. So I think I'll come to Andy first because I kind of got a guess of what you're going to say, but will Steelers still be in a title race come the new year?
Yes.
Okie dokie. Jono, I'll come to you next.
No, and I don't think they are now. Come on, their conference record is dreadful. They've won 1 game out of 9 in the conference. I'm sorry, that's just nowhere near good enough. Even if they won every remaining game in the conference, still no. I don't think they're good enough. I don't think they've got the quality.
Did you like the way that Jono just started off really calmly there by going no, and then it kicked into the
rage
that we all know and love, and he, I just let him gave him the carrot and he took it.
Actually,
yeah, exactly. He doesn't need it. Doesn't need a push.
To make a more serious point about that, they're also going to be losing some depth over the next week because Liam Kirk, Cole Shudra, and Kieran Brown are all going to be with the GB under-20s until a week on Sunday. So Kirk has been getting regular shifts for them. Kieran Brown's been spotting in time and again. Shudra hasn't been getting as many, but even so, that's still 3 players out of that roster for the next week and a half. That's going to affect them as well.
Yeah, and obviously Panthers losing Tetlow and Kelsall as well. So a few lads from the rosters across the Elite League will be going there. And Jono, do you want to, seeing that you brought it up, do you want to plug the GB under-20s?
Yeah, all GB games live on Free Sports next week. Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. So tune into that if you can.
And I think they've got a good commentator, and then
Bob Ballard's
managed to find somebody else
so
as well.
They've got some quality in the commentary team. Let's leave it at
that. Right, moving on. Owen, regarding the Steelers, do you think their challenge will be over by the new year?
No, I'm not going to say that because I've learned with the Steelers too many times down the years that you don't count them out, and to say that they'll be out of it and gone, I just think it's a little too much to say. There's still be too many games left at that point, and you just never know what teams can do. So I'll say they'll still be in it.
Okie dokie. And the final question, Andy, I'm going to come to you last on this one, so we'll go to Jono first. And the final question is, how significant will it be if Belfast gets a big Christmas points haul on the road, in the knowledge that 2018 will see them play 20 home games and only 5 away? And do you see them winning the league if they do so? So, Jono.
I think Belfast are our biggest rivals for the title because that is a huge amount of home games and they are very, very good at home. So I think it depends on how they fare in this away stretch that they've got at the minute. However, the thing that goes against Belfast is they are now another 2 players down due to suspension in their next game, which, looking at this, is against Manchester, who, of course, are flying quite high themselves. So I think Belfast's biggest opponent is probably themselves because they've had so many suspensions. And I mentioned it earlier, 550 penalty minutes compared to Panthers' 254. That is what is going to destroy their season if it carries on. But I do think with having so many games at home in the second half of the season, they will be our biggest rivals to the title. Owen,
I'll come to you next. And just very briefly on Belfast, Adam Keefe, rookie coach, first year behind the bench. 20 home games in 2018 and only 5 away. That is a massive swing, isn't it? So, if they do get a good points haul on the road over the festive period, do you see them winning the league if possible?
The first thing I'll say is, you look at their schedule and it's slightly ridiculous, sort of the imbalance before Christmas and post Christmas in terms of their schedule. If they have a good December, then they'll be right up there, no doubt about it. The only thing I would say is that, as good as they are at home, pressure can sort of do a weird thing sometimes, and you can get in your head. My old mate Steve McLaren used to always push the focus onto the last 10 games of the season in a way to sort of take the pressure in what he thought was taking the pressure off. But in reality, what he was doing was putting the pressure on his players, and it might be that a similar thing happens with the Giants, is that they kind of know in the back of their minds, okay, we've got this long run at home, we've got all these matches in the bag at home where we're really good, and maybe complacency comes in. So I don't think you can read anything into it too much at this point. I will just say on Adam Keefe as well, I was pretty sceptical about him as a coach, but he's impressed me. He's done a decent job with them.
Yeah, I have to admit that as well, to be fair. I thought that it would definitely be a transitional kind of, season or / seasons. I thought, I think I even said it on our WhatsApp group, and I'll hold my hands up. I said, I just don't see them being a rival for us. I think it's going to take him a season to get, used to the job, because let's be honest, it's a big job from going just, a player and being the I hate to use the phrase heartbeat of the team, but I will do, to being the main man and, getting that respect from the players. But he seems to be doing a fantastic job so far. I think obviously it's just, as Jono has said, bringing those penalty minutes down is possibly something that he needs to look at doing in 2018. But we will come to the man that has been just so focused for the whole day, folks. If you are listening, I mean, take a moment and listen to what Andy Haywood is about to tell you, because he has been slaving away today with lots of preparation,
true pro,
lots of things, true pro. I mean, so Andy, I'm going to give you 3 minutes 40 seconds to answer basically Steve's questions as a whole for us, if you will, please. The stage is yours, Andy Haywood, everybody.
It's the first time I've ever done prep, and this is what I get. You can see why I don't do it, right? You can also tell that I wasn't at work today.
3 minutes 20 seconds, Andy.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, because all I'm literally going to say is that I've in my own head decided for who's going to win the games that Steve had put forward, and I see it as Panthers being top, Belfast second, Devils third, Steelers fourth, but only 3 points between first and fourth place with the results. So I see there's potential that it could all be over. There's potential that there could be massive deficits to catch up on by the end of the year, but I actually see it being just as close, if not closer, at the end of the season. I actually have us down as getting the least amount of points over the spell. Granted, we play a game less than Belfast and Cardiff, but I see us getting 11 points, Giants and Steelers 12 points, and Cardiff 13 points. I just see it being really tight. So I think ultimately, with that in mind, we will be in the best position because we will still have games in hand. We will have 5 games in hand on Belfast by the start of the new year. But I do think Belfast will be in an incredibly strong position because of the sheer amount of home games they've got coming up. I agree that there will be added pressure on that. But I do think that they've got a good enough team, and as we've said, they have a very good record at home. Certainly over the past few years, at the very least. So it should be a really close and exciting December, and I also think that it will carry on throughout the rest of the season. I don't think we're going to see a team blitz the league and win it by end of February. I think it's going to go right down to the wire.
See, there you go, children. If you're listening, that's what happens when you prepare for things. That's what happens. You get that type of in-depth answer. I'm not sure I kind of agree with it, but hey, that's just my opinion. I can't see 4 points or that kind of points between first and fourth, but that's just my opinion, and most people will say it's not worth anything. So there we go. Moving on to the penultimate question of the evening, and we go back to Twitter, and we go back to Chris Ellis again, because he asked this earlier on, so we will ask it to all of you. And Chris just says, serious question: who has been the most important signing for the Panthers this season? Owen, you can kick us off with that one.
I think I'll go for Brett Pelini. He's top quality, absolutely top notch. I'm not a fan of the phrase clutch scorer, but he seems to get big goals, and he counts as a Brit. I think it's a fantastic move to get him. He seems like a good guy as well, so I'll go Brett Pelini. But it is a team, it is a committee, it is a squad. So it's hard to. It feels harsh picking one, but I'll go with him.
Not Evan Mosley. I know your good friend, and
My
somebody
good
that has
mate,
a very
Evan.
good handshake.
Oh mate, what a handshake! Yeah, well, obviously Evan's right up there as well, but I'll just give the nod to Brett.
Yeah, good call, Jono.
I can't really. I don't know. As I've said, every player contributes, so it's very difficult to say who the best signing has been. I think if I had my head on the block, and was told by a certain cage poster not to sit on the fence, I would probably have to go for Zach Phillips. I think Zach Phillips has been the setup guy. The number of just incredible plays, the doors he's unlocked, the way he just sort of makes something out of nothing to produce a chance. He is the sort of guy where it is if you down, you would look to produce a bit of magic in a David Ling style. So I think if it was down, if I had to give a name, I would say Zach Phillips. But I think there's such a balanced squad; they're all contributing so well that it's very difficult to say an actual name. But yeah, Zach Phillips.
Okay. And finally, Andy, your choice.
I'm going to go slightly less obvious. We have players like Sauvé, Phillips, Polines, who are all deserving of it, but they're the eye-catching, they're the sort of the flair sort of guys within the team. But I think Tim Billingsley for me.
Good shout.
I think realistically, he's probably the best defenseman that we've had since Jason Beckett in the league winning season. I just think he's quality. He goes about his job quietly. He just gets on with it. He doesn't take a shift off. He always competes. His effort level is second to none. And he's a fantastic defenseman. So yeah, I'm going to go for Tim Billingsley.
Good shout. I mean, I think that basically kind of highlights what we've been saying throughout this podcast, in the sense of, the depth that we have in this roster this year has meant that all three of you has said somebody else. So I think that shows you what we've got this year. And I do apologise if you did hear in the background when Andy said Jason Beckett, I did go, oh, because I loved Jason Beckett. What a defenseman, though. What a defenseman. I still miss him.
Badass Beckett, as our old fight correspondent used to call him.
Badass Beckett. Just great defenseman. But I think I can't really argue with any of the three that you've picked. So there we go. We have had another quick question come to us, so we'll answer that one as well, because we don't want to leave anybody out. But this one comes from Chocky on Twitter. And they say, is it time to stop requested reviews? It makes teams look childish and petty. Should all games be watched the following day by a panel? If anything is spotted, escalate to the DOPS system. I mean, Jono, I'll come to you first, because you posted in our WhatsApp group about obviously the ban that we're going to get for it's Brasieres. Sorry,
yeah. And looking at the footage, he deserves it. It's a check to the head, and I've got no qualms about that whatsoever.
But it was a requested review.
It was a requested review, and I hate requested reviews. I don't like them because I think they can be cynical, and I think they can be used as spite. I think they can be used for an advantage, and that's wrong. It's the Department of Player Safety. It should be about player safety and nothing else. So, from my point of view, if the resources are there to do it, then yes, I think every game should be looked at by an independent panel or an independent adjudicator, and any instance that look like they could have a ban, then they get looked at and players get banned. I said this at the start when the whole DOPS thing started, and I understand that the resources may not have been available for it, but now we've got this whole new DOPS. We've got this excellent review system where everything is explained perfectly, and like I said, the Bouzier review is absolutely a check to the head, and yes, it probably deserves a ban. But it was requested, and that leaves a bit of a sour taste. I don't like requests by other teams. I don't like citing by other teams. I think it should be down to somebody independently looking at that game and then making the decision.
I mean, Owen, I'll come to you. The magic word, surely, which Jono mentioned, is resources. The Elite League just don't have them, do they, unfortunately, to do that and have that level of, review system in place.
Yeah, of course it is, and I understand that it's sort of the only way that it can work when you don't have that team of people to watch every game. But as Jono said, like, it's a ridiculous system. It's utterly ridiculous. It's not about player safety at all. If Panthers are playing Steelers on Saturday night and Belfast on Sunday, and a Steeler player does something to a Panthers player, but Panthers would prefer that Sheffield would have a stronger lineup for the Sunday, then they're not going to request a review, surely. The system is open to abuse by the teams involved, number one. Number two is, I think I'm right in saying that there are fees involved in, or some money changes hands, and if you're upheld, you get it back or whatever. But there's certainly money involved. I mean, again, money shouldn't be involved. Teams shouldn't be able to go, all right, well, we can afford to put in this review, so we'll put one in, whereas another team may say, well, we can't afford to put it in, so we won't. It's utterly ridiculous, but I accept that it's sort of the only thing we've got right now.
I mean, Andy, just very quickly on this one, Panthers, we don't really, well, we very rarely request a review, do we? And you could say in the same game, if Bucieris is going to get banned for the check to the head that he did, you could also argue that Levi Nelson, who did get a charging penalty against him, for me there was definitely elbows to the head on Lacko. So I think you could argue that maybe we should have put in a requested review. But what's your kind of, do you kind of concur with what Owen and Jono have said, that it's just a little bit pathetic, basically?
Yeah, I've made no bones about it. I went on a rant on a previous show a few months ago. It's like Jono said, it's called the Department of Player Safety. So why are they not taking player safety seriously? Why is it down to the clubs to have to be nitpicking and paying money to request these reviews? As a minimum, they should be reviewing the games. That's a minimum. They should be looking at them, and they should be being reviewed from start to finish for these kind of incidents. They're all recorded games. A lot of them have all got, they all get edited and highlights put out practically straight away as soon as the games are finished. So, it's not like we're in an age now where you have to send a videotape to the office because it won't get there till the Tuesday or the Wednesday or something like that. Those days are over. Everything now should be reviewed, and it shouldn't be up to the teams to decide what they want and what they don't want to review.
Well, thank you very much for answering those questions, boys. We will come to the final question, and this one comes from Ted Logan on the Cage. A really good question, really one that makes you, it's you three that's had to do it, so but really get your minds thinking. And Ted has asked, if Owen had to put his favourite 6 Panthers players on the ice, who would they be? Obviously, that's a netminder, 2D, and 3 forwards. Now, we've obviously we haven't gone for just this season, we've gone favourite ever. So, Owen, kind of how long did you have to think about this? Was it a quick decision, or, did you have to rack your brains for a few hours?
Well, I'll be honest. I haven't managed to get it down to 6 names, so I'm just gonna chuck the list out. I think I've got my netminder and my 2D sorted. Although I will throw in an honourable mention for Guy Lepine, who almost made it. And the other thing I'll say is that this is sort of my favourite, so this doesn't necessarily mean best. It was the names that came to mind when I started thinking about it. So killer in goal, Craig Kowalski. My defenseman would be Jim Pack, who was playing when I first started watching, when my uncle started taking me to the arena. He was just a joy. And a guy we mentioned a little bit earlier, Jason Beckett, who was just an absolute beast on the back end. There's that noise again. And then for the forwards, how many forwards have I got? I think I've got 7 forwards, 6 or 7 forwards, and I think like 5 of them are centres. I'll just throw the names: Bruce Graham, who was just deadly the season he won the title; Jordan Fox, who I guess could play D as well. The goal that he scored. Brayhead in the playoff quarter final might have been, and the way that he basically couldn't sit down on the bench because he slipped a disc in his back, and the way that he carried that team was just incredible. Greg Haddon I always loved, not least because he was the same height as me, so that was nice. Jeff Harima was a guy that got all sorts of stick, but was just so classy out on the ice. Billy Ryan was a guy that I loved when he was here, and Brandon Benedict will always be a hero. So I'll pick 3, and I'll just go Fox, Graham, and Harima. But any of those guys.
There you go. You see, I can guarantee that Matt Davis or Chris Ellis would have just gave us six Panthers players. But there we go. We'll move on. Thank you very much, Owen. Obviously, Andy, we'll come to you next.
Kowalski, Brian Thompson, Mike Rees, David Ling, Dan Tessier, Lee Jinman.
There you go. Was it a quick decision for you? Has those 6 always been in your mind for you?
It was pretty quick. I sort of the forwards were sort of the defence sort of picked itself, to be fair, because I will always hold Brian Thompson and Mike Rees as the benchmark for defencemen. If a player went within 5 yards of the netminder at the time, they were brave and they were going to get hurt, and that's the way they played. They were solid defensemen. No one was going to get easy spaces in front of a netminder. So they're the benchmark I still hold defensemen to. The forwards were slightly more difficult because I kind of felt like you needed a bit of balance, because you could have just sort of gone for like the top point scorers. So you think of people like Galbraith and you think of like Linger and stuff like that, but you kind of needed goal scoring within that. So I threw in Tessier and Jinman because as much as they were also passers, they got a real snipe for the goal. I also, just very off topic, just very quickly as well, I flipped on its head and went for the reverse of it, and I came up with Davis Parley, Jan Krulis, Steve Peltier, Yuri Golicic, Robert Liskak, and Mikhail Nemirovsky. So that was good fun.
Wow. As Andy said earlier, he's had a day off work today. So
I've just done that now, to be fair.
Have you? See, quick thinking brain. There we go. And Jono, finally, we'll come to you. Obviously, you're the person that's been watching the Panthers for the longest. So, is there a mixture of old and new in there, or
there is definitely a mixture? My netminder is Trevor Robbins, who was sensational.
A lot of people's first,
yeah, sensational netminder. Defence: Roy Mitchell played for us in the 98-99 season. Was the classiest defenceman I have ever seen play for us. Absolutely brilliant. Superb at the back, could make a pass, and he also beat up Tommy Plummer, which gives him extra points there. But no, one of the best defensemen I've ever seen pull on the black and gold shirt. And my second defenseman is Jimmy Pack, who was just oozed class from every pore in his body, and is now actually the South Korea head coach.
He is
in the IAAHF World Championships. So yes, he was just a brilliant defenseman. For the forwards, I've gone for David Ling, still one of the greatest passers of the puck I've ever seen. David Alexandra Beauregard, just a pure sniper, and also an incredibly classy guy as well. And finally, the one and only Paul Lady, who got all the points records for the Panthers, and just was a brilliant player who couldn't only do it when we had 3 imports. He managed to transition to the Super League when it was all imports and was still top of the scoring charts. Just a class above, and a fully deserved shirt retirement, that number 22. So yeah, they are all mine. But I will have one honourable mention, because I know that Ted put right wing, left wing, centre, and I think for the centre, I was going to go with Matt Myers. The thing about Matt Myers, if you had a clutch situation where you needed somebody to win a face-off, he was the guy who was sent out there. And it's such an important part of the game. You win a face-off and keep possession, especially if you are attacking. Yeah, he was clutch in those situations, and I think Matthew Myers is one of those players who was probably never fully appreciated for what he did, but was incredibly important in every single Panthers team that he played in. Yeah,
and I think we saw that when he went back to Cardiff. for the second time,
Yeah.
because you do kind of see what you've missed. But just listening to you three mention the people that you just have, it kind of makes you realise that we've been lucky, haven't we? We've seen some fantastic hockey players over the years. I mean, from the players that you've mentioned, you three, they span so many years and so many generations, so many coaches, so many different eras of ice hockey within this country. So we can easily get down at times, can't we, about the team that we support and we love and we're very passionate about. But we also, we have been very lucky, haven't we, really? That's what I'm trying to kind of say, that we've, of the plays and the people that we've seen put on the black and gold jersey over the years, really, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. And the thing is, I was sort of looking at the team, the line that I picked, and I just thought there's nobody from the league-winning side in there, apart from DAB, who came in as a spare import.
Yeah.
And David Ling, Jono.
Oh, sorry, yes. No.
Yeah.
Ignore me. It's been a long day.
Oh, and what a great way to end the podcast. First of all, I would just like to say thank you very much for all the people that obviously sent in your questions. Some real belters this week for the guys to answer. So if you do have a question for us in the future, then send it to us. Twitter, Facebook, The Cage, several ways to do it. Just go on to our website, which is thecatswhiskersonline.co.uk, and you'll find all our links, etc. there. We will be back next Monday with a review podcast, and obviously we will look forward to the next Ask TCW podcast that we do as well. So do get your questions into us straight away. Don't hold out for when we put it out. Send it to us anytime you get that light bulb moment, and we will put it onto the next show for you. But what we would just like to say is thank you very much to the best media person that we've had on this podcast over the last 3 or 4 weeks. It is Mr. Owen Bradley.
You're very welcome, guys, and the checks in the post for that at the end as well.
Yes, thank you very much for that. But no, it's been a pleasure having you on, because obviously you do have a new gig now, but it's nice to hear your voice and to get you back involved with the Cat's Whiskers. So we do thank you for taking the time out, because I know you're a busy man these days. And hopefully see you on Saturday as well.
Yeah, I'll be there Saturday, and great to talk hockey again and catch up with you guys as well. It's been a pleasure.
Good. Thank you very much, Andy. I think everybody is very appreciative of the work that you put in this week, and obviously the prep that you did today. It really shone through. So thank you very much, Andy.
No worries. I mean, if Owen is the best media guy, I'm presuming that Matt and Chris make up second and third in whatever order. Does that officially mean that Jono is the worst?
I don't really know how to approach this question that you've just asked there. But, obviously, Jono, thank you very much. Obviously, you must have put a lot of prep into what you've done today, because you said that you didn't put anybody in the Elite League winning team in your favourite 6 players. And then, of course, there was the little player called David Ling. But hey-ho.
Beauregard.
He kind of explained Beauregard, so let's not kick him while he's down, Andy. I mean, come on.
Okay.
I've spent.
It's not very often. I've spent
all day researching 35 players from the Estonia under-20 team. Give me a break, please.
And if you didn't know, Jono's also commentating with Bob Bullard on the under-20s, Free Sports UK. Yeah, I'm sure we'll retweet it or anything. So, but no, thank you, Jono, as always.
You're welcome, mate.
And that's it. That is it for this week's Ask TCW podcast. We do hope you've enjoyed listening to us ramble on for over an hour. But all that's left to say is thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
This edition of the Cat's Whiskers podcast was brought to you by the Bunkers Hill Hockley.